All right, well, we're past time anyway, so, and we have a quorum, so let's, I'm going to call to order this November 5th, 2020 regular board work session. I have all of our directors in attendance with the exception of Matt O'Connell. We do have a meeting agenda for the work session. Is there any action?
Chair Peterson, I'm sorry to interrupt. It looks like Matt is in the attendee link and not the panelist link.
I see his raised hand.
Oh.
Let me promote him. Hang on a second. Gotta find him first. Give it just a second.
It's just nice to know I was the only one that didn't have to be promoted to panelist.
Thank you. I've been
You should be
promoted.
in there now.
I'm sitting
Sorry
there. I'm
about
here. I'm here.
Okay, well, so back to roll call. We now have all directors in attendance and always did. It was a mirage that we didn't, Matt, and I'm sorry for that.
No, I just went the wrong link. Sorry.
So with that, we have a meeting agenda back up there. I would entertain a motion for the meeting agenda.
I would move to approve the meeting agenda as presented.
I second.
Okay, moved by Chris, second by Myra to approve the meeting agenda. All those in favor? Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? Okay. All right. First up is an information item. I want to welcome two guests, Katrina Doughty, or Dowdy. I want to make sure I get this right once and for all. Katrina, are you there?
Sorry, I'm here. Dowdy.
Dowdy, okay. Well, thanks for being here. And then Michael Sonnleitner. All right, I got a thumbs up for that. So thank you both for being here. What's before us, board, just to reiterate, the Oregon School Boards Association holds normally fall regional meetings on an annual basis. However, due to COVID-19, those meetings have been reconfigured. And one of the highlights there is that OSBA board candidates usually have the opportunity to introduce themselves to school boards in the region. So because of that reconfiguration, the Gresham-Barlow School Board has invited two candidates who actually sought to introduce themselves to us. So I don't want to take credit for the initiative on that one. But we've invited our two candidates who are running for OSBA position 17, which is the Multnomah region, to speak to the board. Both have been so kind to provide materials and information about them. And so this really isn't going to be any kind of drawn out interview. Really, we're just grateful that you'd be here to kind of let us know about yourselves. What we're looking for is just 2 or 3 minutes, kind of what we would have seen at the fall regional meetings. Introduce yourself, what interests you in particular about the OSBA board. This is an extended stump speech if you'd like. Really, we're just excited to get to know you as colleagues from other boards. With that board, we will be deciding at the December meeting. Our board has the option to take action to basically represent ourselves as one vote. And I think perhaps Chris, you might know better than I do that we'll be one of 7 or 8 in our region.
Yeah, you'd asked me the one question I don't know. I think there are 8 in our region that do vote. And you're right, it's one board vote. That was one of the changes they made several years ago, where we used to vote at convention and it was one member, which was a little odd when everything else we do is by district. So that's what it is. And I'm going to go look real quick and see how many they are.
Well, don't go too far. You can tell us at the December meeting, because I want to invite Katrina Doughty, if you wouldn't mind, kicking us off with just an introducing yourself to us and what interests you about the OSBA position.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? The fans at work are really loud. Okay, great. Um, hi, everyone. My name is Katrina Dowdy. Thank you for the time today. I use the pronouns she, her, and hers. And the reason I always start out with that during my introduction is because as I was looking through all of the OSBA candidates and seeing my work in public health and with school boards, I realized that not a single candidate in OSBA history has listed their pronouns as part of their application. And I know that this is one very small step that is vital to showing our students and all of our students that we see them, we respect them, we meet them where they're at, and it is active suicide prevention. So that's why I start out with that when I do my introductions. You'll also see that in my name on the Zoom. I invite all of you to do that for meetings because it's an important thing for our students and our communities. The reason that I'm interested in OSBA is because I realize that through a lot of our school boards, we have wonderful leadership from educators and from people who are really ingrained in education as an institution. However, we seem to be lacking a lot of leaders that have experience in public health. And especially right now, when we're looking at a pandemic, I think it's vital that we have leaders that understand a range of everything that affects our students, their families, and our communities. And so my board was realizing how much they were leaning on me for leadership during the pandemic and figuring out how best to protect our students and our communities. And I thought maybe OSBA in our region would appreciate that experience and that leadership as well. So I'm hoping to bring that to OSBA and really be more of a bridge between public health, education, and comprehensive care for our students, as well as, I just worked really hard to make sure that school board members could be active and really engaged with the universal preschool measure that just passed, woo-woo! And I see that that is an important way for school board members, public health, parents, students, to advocate for important resources that our community needs. And I'd love to see more of that really like forceful push towards equity and advancement from our school boards and engaging with our community. And that's what I'm hoping to bring to OSBA and our region. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Michael, would you do us the favor of introducing yourself as well?
Thank you very much. First, I do want to congratulate Katrina for being such a fine candidate. Her public health experience would be a very important voice in any meeting context. I'm a lifelong educator. I taught for 27 years full-time at Portland Community College, political science and peace and conflict studies. I am gender non-binary, which adds a little diversity that might not be too obvious by looking at me, though some people wonder at the double pierced ears. I try not to be too obvious because I don't think it's necessary for me to be. I am inspired by Gandhi, among others. I'm a strong advocate of diversity, equity, and inclusion that includes changes on the PCC board of recent vintage, including our passing a sanctuary institution proclamation with my strong encouragement. In terms of running for the OSBA, I have seen for the past 6 years as a PCC board member, dysfunction between the Oregon Community College Association and the Oregon School Board Association, and not just the organizations, but also K through 12 and PCC. We don't communicate much, and we have tremendous amount of common interest in our students. They are our students. Most people don't realize that PCC has over 6,800 pre-college students enrolled this fall at Portland Community College. We are, as a school board, responsible for as many non-college students as many school boards are. We have the common concerns. I figure that over my years at teaching at PCC alone, I've had over 1,000 high school students in my classes, participating in any one of 5 different high school completion programs we have. And so the overlap is obvious to me. All of my kids went to public schools. I helped to create Leonardo da Vinci Middle School as an arts magnet program in the Portland Public School District. I am involved in K through 12 as a community activist. I'm obviously involved on the PCC board, now as also their representative on the Oregon Community College Association. So I'll be more in tune with the OCCA than ever before. I would like to be more in tune with the Oregon Community College Association attempts to work with OSBA than ever before. And the common interest is not simply in our students, but also in their futures. Over 40% of high school seniors who go on to college in Oregon go to one of Oregon's 17 community colleges. None of those 17 community colleges are represented by a voting member on the OSBA board, not one. No offense to Katrina, but there are currently 2 educational service district representatives out of the 20 educational service districts in Oregon on the OSBA board of directors out of 22. So there's proportionate representation in a sense for K through 12 on that board, for the educational service districts on that board, but not one community college representative. And I see that as a tremendous gulf that could be bridged a little by me, raising issues on that board relating to foster care, which, by the way, is a continuing issue after this. The foster care kids are no longer kids and they go on to community colleges. Issues of dual enrollment, which seem to be an elephant in the room for many OSBA members. I'd like to deal with that elephant and have greater ease of transfer and clearness when it comes to high school completion in college and beyond. Employers look to community college degrees for better employees. Career technical education at the high school level is great, but it is not sufficient for many employers who, 80% of whom in the Portland area, tell PCC that they need a 2-year college degree to be confident in that employee as an electrician, auto mechanic, whatever it might be. And so I'd like to work and build bridges between OCCA and OSBA while carrying on my passion for education, which has always included K through 12 on upwards. I have 3 grandkids in the Centennial district now, in high school as a senior, as a 6th grader, and in kindergarten. And I'm very familiar with the challenges that that district is having in communicating to my grandkids virtually. I'm very concerned about how we respond in the future as we readjust after COVID to the gaps that are almost certain to be developed between people of color and Caucasian students when it comes to distance learning. The gaps are predictable, they're to be expected, and they need to be bridged. That's my passion, education, and I hope I may be a bridge for community colleges to K through 12, and for you folks to better communicate to the community colleges your needs in the state of Oregon. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thanks for sharing, both of you. Thank you for taking the time, both to provide the information in advance and then to let us get to know you here.
Thank
You are welcome to stick around for our public work session, but you're also very welcome to leave the meeting. And yeah, and then again, board, we will discuss these fine candidates on December at our December meeting, and that'll be our opportunity to submit a vote to OSBA. So thank you both again. We're going to move forward on our agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
And so Blake, I did look up, I had to write them down is how I remembered how many there were. There are 8 school districts in Multnomah County region. The MESD, the PCC and MHCC are all in our region. And there currently sits as ex officio members, the current president of the Community College Association. So they are on the board, but not as a voting member. And same with the ESD, also has always a sitting ex officio president of their OAESD association. So there is some representation of community college and ESD, but not as voting members. They can, however, the MESD, PCC, and Mountain Hood Community College, as well as the 8 school districts, can offer up leadership. So just to clarify that.
All right. Well, thank you. Okay. Moving forward into, we have a few discussion items. First up is an OSBA staff retirement. Renee Sessler of OSBA is retiring after more than a decade of service to school boards across Oregon. Our board might remember her fondly for her work at kind of bringing our staff, community, and board inputs in a coherent way into our mission and visioning exercises. So OSBA is asking for help to celebrate her and her service to Oregon students. I believe she was on the Reynolds School Board as well for a while. They've created a web link for people to share messages, well wishes, memories, and her pictures. Time has been set aside in the agenda for the board to discuss if they'd like to submit a message in honor of Ms. Sessler's retirement. Any conversation about Renee's work or leaning of the board?
So Renee, yeah, she was on the Reynolds School Board. That was where I first met her. I was had been on the Gresham-Barlow board, and she was the one who actually encouraged me back in the day. You had to run at the convention in order to be elected, and she encouraged me to run. She also, if it doesn't say in there, was on the School Board Association for Idaho for a time, and then came back to Oregon as a trainer and support person. And so she has done a lot with Oregon and with the school board associations, and it's going to be an exciting time for her to be able to retire. I think it would be good if people could drop her a note and just let her know what aspect they knew her, what time, and things that she was able to bring for us.
From your comment, Chris, I gather maybe you're indicating keep it individualized, so individual board members could contact her and share
I think
their
so. Yeah, I
appreciation.
don't think we need to do that as a board. I think it'd be more meaningful as people have known her in different capacities, since they have the link set up, and it's giving her notes going on to different things, whatever it is that we want to say in support of her, that I think doing it individually would be fine.
Okay. Matt, did I miss a comment that you were going to make? I saw you unmute.
Sorry, I don't know how to operate this apparently. No, I'm just going to say that when it becomes available, I would like to get the link because I would like to drop a note to her.
Okay.
I'll forward it on to you, Matt. It came through an OSBA email a couple weeks ago, so I'll send it out.
All right. Thank you. Okay. we have a return to learn metrics update, which we had originally slotted for just the work session. We have a number of public comments that perhaps some of you saw. I just got suddenly a wave of them and just started pushing them to Sarah and giving community members an opportunity to submit it as a public record. Because of the volume of interest, I would like to also have a brief overview of these return to learn guidance in the public meeting. So I will be proposing that as an addition to the agenda unless somebody else wants to beat me to the punch. But with that, Mr. Cook or Dr. Farrell.
Chair Peterson.
Yeah.
Chair Peterson. I can actually add that to my agenda if you like. That way you don't have to add an extra agenda because I always have an academic update anyway.
Okay, that'd be excellent. Thank you.
Should we just save this portion for the business meeting then, if we're just going to review it again for the community?
I was thinking of keeping it for the reason that Dr. Perot was in a meeting with the governor, and I feel like we have opportunity to maybe dive in a little bit deeper here than maybe we will in the public meeting. Would be the only reason why I propose to keep it. But yeah, I would encourage brevity, but I am interested in how those metrics might affect us, Mr. Cook.
As a reminder, this is a public meeting as well.
Yes, Chair, and I'll be interested in whatever guidance you have for what the highlights should be in the business meeting as well, or I can just pick and choose also. I will be as brief as I can because there has been a lot of change over the last week with the governor's announcement. Sarah, are you going to be managing the slides?
I was going to ask, would it be easier for you to present so that you can click through the slides, or do you want to?
I'll just tell you to advance if that's okay.
Okay.
We'll just go quickly.
I will bring it up.
All right, we'll go into slide 2 here. I want to review with you guys just the basic rapid response team format that we have. We have 6 teams that regularly make decisions. They feed those decisions either up to the control tower, which is district leadership team, or to the building level teams. And there's a reciprocal communication loop that we keep going each week so that we can make decisions faster and more efficiently in an ever-changing environment. Slide 3, please, Sarah. And once it gets up there, because I can't see that on my screen. Board, can you see this? Slide 3? No. Sarah, there's something else that you're presenting here. It's not the presentation.
I think we were seeing some of her calendar or somebody's calendar.
Yeah, we were. Yeah. All right, we're at slide 3. Almost at slide 3. Okay, I assume everybody can see that. We are right now, these are the old metrics. As you can see, the trend was not favorable. On the left-hand side, it's a case rate graph. The old standard was 30 cases per 100,000 for grades K3. That has changed. I'll get to that in a bit. And then 10 cases per 100,000 for grades 4 to 12. The county positivity rate had to be below 5% for 3 weeks. Same with the other metrics as well. And then a state metric positivity rate of 5% for 3 weeks was also required in some instances. That metric, the state one, is eliminated. We don't have to follow that one anymore. Sarah, if you could go to the next slide, I will give the new table. This table is at first can be a little confusing to read. So what's most important to us is the top row where it says case rate per 100,000 people over 14 days, and that's for the large counties. And this table is designed to let districts slide between columns. The other row that's important to us is the county test positivity row, and that those are the positivity rates and where you would be in that table. We are required to be in an on-site distance learning form to have a case count below 100 per 100,000 and a positivity rate below 8%. I'll show you our data later, but I'll tell you right now that we're in the transition phase. The secondary is a case count below 50 per 100,000 and a positivity rate below 5%. When I say secondary, we now can bring back K through 5 students at the elementary level instead of K3 on these new metrics. The metrics also cover just a 2-week period instead of a 3-week period, and they're an average of those 2-week periods also. Questions on this slide before I advance? Okay, we'll advance. This is the new metric, and this is current data as of last Friday. This week's hasn't been added in yet. So we have to be at, like I said, we are in the transition column. So we are at about 167.5 case rate. It seems like our case rate has doubled. It hasn't. What they're doing is adding two weeks together into one. And but by doing it that way, they're trying to eliminate anomalies in weeks of data. So they're doing 2 weeks at a time. The same for the positivity rate, which is at the right-hand column. You can also see that we're not trending in the right direction. If we're in a transition column, you want to be trending toward data that gets you to on-site learning and blended learning. We're trending to the CDL. And I should have said one thing earlier. We, as a county, Multnomah County, because of its community spread rate, is not even eligible to open right now. So we're stuck and we're trending in the wrong direction. Questions on that one? Okay. The next slide is another table, and it really just shows the trend line of the old metrics and our current metrics, and they're basically the same based on these new rates. But I will also say that we are in a disease phase where we are seeing very, very rapid increases in cases and positivity rate, which is not a good sign. Over the past 14 days, we have seen a 67% increase in cases over a 14-day average, a 17% increase in fatalities, and a 21% increase in hospitalizations. And if I take you back to the spring, one of the reasons that things were shut down was that so we wouldn't overwhelm our hospital systems in particular. And we are exponentially higher in case rates in the county than we were in the spring.
Question, John.
Yes, ma'am.
So how is the, and if I've missed it, sorry, I was kind of looking at notes, looking at your stuff.
Okay.
Is testing increased as well?
It has. We are in the county, we're between 4,000 and 6,000 cases or tests done a day. That's a substantial increase from when the federal government delivered, I think, 80 to 100,000 test kits about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And so they're testing a lot more. And the anticipation, Chris, that's a very good question, was that the positivity rate would go down, but it hasn't.
Because I think that's kind of been some of the big question is how many people are we testing? And if there aren't that many tests, then they're triaging who gets the test. So it's likely that whoever gets the test is most likely got symptoms.
Yes and no. They're doing a lot more referrals from doctor's offices before you go to the doctor's office. If you show any kind of cross symptoms, they'll make you take a test and you may not have it. They're also voluntarily giving a lot more tests that you can pay for too. But there is some of what you said too, Chris, that's true as well. Other questions?
Is this your last slide?
We have 2 more and I can go pretty quickly on those. We've started our plan for return in earnest. I'm happy to answer questions about that later. It's not the topic for here. But we sent out a staff survey this week of who would be able to return or who cannot return at this point because of a secondary condition with a doctor's note. These are the initial numbers, and James will correct me because he did this survey. I think we've had 900 of our employees do the survey, which was sent out yesterday, and we have 1,100 employees. So we've had a pretty good return rate already. These are the people that have said they can't come back at this point. I anticipate that it will increase because people are calling a good deal to ask questions also. Sarah, you can advance to the next slide, please. This next slide is people who say they can't return and it's childcare related. They'll have childcare issues. So we do have a large number of staff that are not able to return, and we will have to plan around that. Last, I'll bring you back to the table I gave you before. Here's just some interesting data for us. And when you talk about trending in the right or the wrong direction, this is as of last Friday, we were at 167.2 cases per 100,000 and we were growing. We are moving toward the distance learning phase if we were in school right now. And that's not a direction we want to go. And the same is true for the positivity rate. And if you look at recent daily case counts in Oregon, you're seeing that huge growth. November 5th, today, 805 cases. Yesterday, 589. The day before, 482. November 2nd, 559. And that is much higher than September. The 500 cases is equivalent to what was happening in August, but they're way higher than what we were in the spring. Go ahead to the next slide, Sarah. And that's it. Ready for questions?
Questions of Mr. Cook or the team?
Yeah, I was just going to reiterate, your point, Blake, in how we present this to the public, right? There are some really upset people and we have some really strict standards. And, if we can really present this presentation in the next slide, really give context on, our hands really have been tied, that these metrics are not set by us, that, that just give that information, I think, as clear as possible. I think that would be really helpful and answer a lot of those questions. And also who to refer more of those questions to, because if people are reaching out to us as the board, right, and we, are not specialists on the return to learn metrics and everything that's going on, being able to appropriately direct those questions to the appropriate person so that they can address some of these community needs or concerns.
I can emphasize those things for sure. Is there any of the specific data you would like? Because I'm sure you don't want me to go over the full slide presentation for the business meeting.
Well, and Robin, you should answer that. One question that is begged that I have heard talking with community members, and perhaps the governor addressed it. I don't gather that Oregon, our neighbors are in-person learning. Is that accurate? So Washington and California and Idaho are all in person?
Much of Idaho,
at the K through 3 hybrid.
Yeah, much of Idaho, yes. Much of Washington, I haven't looked at that to tell you for sure, Blake, but I do believe that more of them are, yes. And some in California. Yeah, some. Mm-hmm.
And same with some in California, but not all.
I think the community pressure on us, if I could say, isn't just about hands being tied. It's going to be looking at other districts, and I think Laco and Bend-Lapine both. I'm not sure if Bend-Lapine ever actually stepped in it.
They did not.
Okay, but they considered resolutions that were to, they were purely political demonstrations, but to ask the governor to relent on restrictions, and the appeal was mostly to neighboring states that were conducting some level of hybrid special education instruction and K through 3.
I can speak to some of that too, and the special ed Michelle can speak to, but I also know that we did start off with much stricter standards, so much of the state did not go back when Washington, California, and Idaho had less strict standards. So they did start school earlier, or physical school earlier, and we weren't in that position. But our metrics now match our neighbors.
Okay.
The challenge is that we are in a huge growth phase for the disease.
I think that's tremendously helpful, John, that information.
Okay.
And do we also still have the Idaho, where we have border, their hospitals are full and they're sending people our way as well?
I didn't know they were sending them our way, but I know that their systems are being very taxed.
Okay.
Yes.
And then on some of this, you know, we talk about it from the school perspective because that's what we're here for. That's what we do, is we talk about it from the school perspective. I haven't heard anything more about it from a business standpoint, whether or not the schools are doing something different from what businesses are able to do. And granted, shopping at Home Depot is not a classroom full of kids. And so I didn't know, when we had the meeting with the governor, that didn't really come up because we were talking education. But if they start loosening for retail and for businesses, then we get more pushback on getting the schools. And so having that message of, again, you're not spending 3 hours at Home Depot with the same group of 20 people versus in a classroom.
And the governor said, and I've seen it in writing, I wish I could reference the document, that she may take stricter standards to restrict our going to businesses, restrict us again to get the metrics to a point where we can return by February 1st. And I know Catrice will correct me if I'm wrong on that one, but she's been pretty clear.
Yeah, I'd like to speak to that.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, it's clear that COVID's here somewhat to stay, if you will. And in the governor's committee, again, those things that John highlighted, the measured period of a 2-week average, also removing the statewide positivity metric. There are some more relaxed rules regarding elementary K5, 6, what we have room for. The new metrics, of course, can allow for some limited in-person, and also obviously allowing the localities, usually regionally, and that's what we've been doing as superintendents, is talking to each other as to what's happening in our districts and where we are. I think only Portland is doing some athletics right now. To my knowledge, through the superintendent, there's not anything going on in our neighboring districts unless it's parent-driven, outside of a school-sponsored event. And ODE, of course, is issuing regular updates to us, and John is correct. The governor did say that if she's in a position where she's noticing areas going too high before and not being able to bring kids back, that you would enforce some stricter situations that go on throughout where, stay-at-home orders, if you will. Her goal is that we have our students back in a hybrid form by February 1.
So, sorry, can I ask another question, Blake, or do you have
Yes,
one?
please. No,
Okay.
please do.
So the other thing that we've been getting a lot of questions and comments about are the students, the special needs, special ed, IEP students. And is there, I don't know what it would look like if some students that are in that classification came back into a building before we reopened into K3, 4, 5, 6. I don't know if that's practical, feasible, or possible.
Mm-hmm. Chris, you are right. We can have some limited contact with our students. Again, these metrics are out on last Friday, I think, Thursday, Friday, and we definitely are moving in a direction. I know Michelle will speak a little bit more to that. But if we do athletics at any point, we have to bring our students with exceptional needs back. Anytime we do any students other than, the hybrid, if you will, you have to bring those students in as well.
Okay. And then
Michelle,
my other question.
Michelle's on here. You want to speak a little bit more
Yeah.
about the SPED, Michelle?
Sure. Yeah, I can tell you that behind the scenes, our team is starting to get to the nitty gritty of what could this look like. We recognize that our families that have students experiencing more complex disability, it's really hard. We've tried to do as many support pieces as we can, getting materials home, those sorts of things. But right now we're really trying to figure out what could that look like. And our interest is if we can provide extra support above and beyond, we're going to try to plan for that too, because we know this has been really hard and on our families and our kids, and we want them back as fast as we can possibly get them back. We're just waiting for those metrics to come down and get all those pieces in place so that we can get them in as quick as we can.
And Michelle, does that include our emergent bilingual students, particularly our newcomers?
Yeah, both Aaron, Karina, and myself, and Tracy Klinger, we were meeting this afternoon, talking through exactly what could that look like, trying to figure out the models, the logistics, how could it work? How could we do as much as we can? How can we differentiate for the different levels for students? So we're discussing all of the groups collectively. There's just different requirements and parameters, but we're looking at all of our vulnerable populations and saying what can we do? How can we make this work as quick as we can?
And Myra, that's consistent throughout the state. So when I say exceptional, I probably should say exceptional ed, if you will, in different cases, because of students with different needs, right? We are required to do that.
This Matt, I have two quick comments. Number one, John, could I get a copy of this presentation because it differs from what's in the board packet?
Certainly. Sarah, I guess you would take that. I can easily send it to you, Matt.
Great. And then just anecdotally, in Montana, they did the hybrid online and distant learning every other day. And it was very disruptive when they had to pull the kids out for 3 weeks because of an increase in COVID cases. They're back again, but I know my grandkids were very upset because they were afraid their friends were going to forget them. So I'd like to get it right the first time rather than do it in fits and starts.
Matt, you bring up a very good point that actually I think we're all grappling with, in that the hybrid or any level of limited in person can sometimes cause those situations. My colleagues in Washington State, I know that's their number one frustration with the whole scenario is that they never know when they'll have to stop and break for 2 weeks because of an outbreak here, there, or whatever. In some cases, it wasn't even their whole district, obviously. Would be one school here, one there, and logistically, it was just as a challenge for them. But of course, we are here to serve the community, and we will do the best we can in order to ensure that we're providing opportunities for our students. But we also want to make sure that we're going as fast as we can to make that happen. But I believe we must also go as slow as we should in order for the health and safety of everyone. And I know parents and families are right now up to here with the situations and and also I know the mental and social situations that's causing for our students, which is heart-wrenching for all of us as educators because we know what it's doing to them academically and socially, emotionally. It's very tough decision to make.
I wanted to just add one thing about the timing because we are concerned about how parents are feeling of the quick turnaround. And so, Matt, you bring up a good point of that if there is an outbreak or if there is a hire and then the state and the county has to shut down, that's an immediate shutting, which is very difficult on families. Whereas when we make when we're able to move forward and make a change, we will have timing in place. So it's not just an overnight, we're going back. And so, we know that we have to make a quick shift. And that means, the 2 weeks or so that we want to give forewarning when the time comes. So I just think that is so true that when that happens, it's an immediate, and that's a very difficult thing for families to experience.
Well, and for the board's understanding too, for background, it's important to know that we have done a substantial amount of work to prepare to return, because had we waited and our metrics were good, we'd have 14 days to bring things back online, which is just not possible. So we'll have a lot of things in place. My deadline just for the health and safety piece is by the end of November, and we're close to being there. And we have some other things to tie up, but we'll be ready when it does happen so that there isn't a delay.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, well, first, any other questions from the board?
I was just going to clarify. So for the business meeting, we do want to go over the entire presentation again. I think that would be more beneficial because we've seen these numbers, they've gone up, they're different, but we're used to this. But I think it'd be more beneficial to participants there, unless anybody has other opinion?
I plan to use the same presentation.
Yeah, I concur with
established.
Robin. I think there's enough. It's a fairly short presentation, and I think it'll still provide good discussion and good insight to the community. Because as Robin said, we've seen these numbers, but our community necessarily has not.
Yes, and to go back to a comment that Robin made earlier, I think just making clear in the business meeting that the repository of information, where that sits on the website, will be.
I will defer to Athena because the new link will go up after the meeting tonight. We wanted to talk to the board first. That's the plan. So I'll say that, and Athena will probably be able to comment exactly where, but I'm assuming it's in the same COVID folder we've always had.
Yeah, and I know. Yes, Dr. Pereira.
I think it's important too that we have our district risk manager talk with you all a little bit about that from the perspective of the chair he sits in. If Jordan wants to share a little bit about his conversations through PACE and other situations, because that's important, I think, for the board to be aware of that as well.
Yeah, so what's been challenging about the situation is that our insurance providers' perspective on things hasn't changed. Our overall liability has not changed. Metric changes from the governor's office doesn't change any of that. And so the risk situation hasn't improved at all. As John showed you, the metrics are moving in a direction that isn't positive right now. I do think knowledge of the disease itself, or the virus, shouldn't say disease, the virus, is improving. As school districts open up, we are getting some relevant information about how COVID spreads through schools. And, the preliminary data is actually encouraging. For the most part, what we're seeing is that rate of spread in a school mostly matches the rate of spread in the community in which that school sits. I say that's encouraging because it indicates that the behaviors of the community have more to do with the risk level in a school than does the activity of going to school. That said, we live in a county where those metrics are going way up. And so this is really, from a risk perspective, specifically about returning kids to in-person, whether it's education or activities. This is a hard time. It's not an ideal time for that. I do hear from the community, as you do, and I resonate and sympathize with the fact that there are other risks involved here that families are experiencing as a result of this situation. But I just wanted the board to know from the risk perspective of the school district itself, we're not seeing anything that's making this a better situation. And in fact, in a lot of ways, it's worse. I think a month or two ago, I probably would have said I'm a lot more amenable to some things, even though the state at that time wasn't okay with us opening different things. And now, and I want to be clear that I'm speaking about the risk perspective of the school district. And so I don't, I know we've got 3 or 4 attendees here. I want to make sure that parents don't feel that they haven't been heard. I absolutely hear that. I do think that we have to, as a body, figure out how to balance the different risk elements at play here. But just from a liability perspective, as a district, the situation has not improved.
Okay. And no legislative action or anticipated action that would provide some level of tort coverage for the district from a risk standpoint.
No, not that I've heard of at all. Our insurance provider did give us $50,000 in legal defense. And so if additional coverage, we already had some coverage. And so if we were to get sued, for example, it would cover the legal defense in that lawsuit, but we don't have any coverage for communicable diseases themselves. And we have not heard of anything from the state. And we've asked directly. I'm in contact with state leaders every single week. As you all know, Dr. Pereira is as well. And so we're asking this question directly, and we haven't heard any indication that that is even something that the legislature is considering. So,
Jordan, a question that you don't need to answer now, but I'll ask in the regular business meeting. If you could elaborate on what does a signed waiver actually protect the district from a litigative standpoint? That, of course, is not the principal concern in any of this, but it is a concern. And I think to a lay parent, we go, I'll sign whatever you tell me so I can get my kids back in an activity or back into school. I'll bear all of that risk, especially as we learn more about the virus and how it affects kids in particular, and that they're maybe not super spreaders the way that we feared they might be. I think parents have a willingness there, but that is not, from what I've understood from you and from Mike before you, that is not actual litigative protection from the district.
yeah, and I can certainly speak to that. I do want to mention, though, that when that question comes around, I do feel compelled to just share the fact that signing away your legal ability to pursue remedy is something that disproportionately impacts certain communities and families. I don't see that as a solution. I feel like we have to have a solution in which we can say, and I know that you share that, Chair Peterson. I'm not trying to say that you don't, but we have to find ways that we can actually safely bring kids back. Just because signing away legal protection it of course impacts different people differently, and a well-resourced family, a student contracting COVID, their access to medical care, their access to paid leave from work, all those types of things are things that we have to consider when we talk about these types of things. And so the equity question is a much larger and more complicated conversation than just, let's get kids back because well-resourced families are going other places to get access to certain things and stuff like that. It cuts in every direction. And so we are, as a staff, doing the best that we can to develop plans that when the state allows us to, we can safely bring kids back. I would love it if the state gave us some sort of relief from that liability burden. But at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is bring kids back in a way that we would never need those protections from the state.
That's really well taken, Jordan. Thank you. Okay. Don't want to cut anybody's questions off. We've got 5 minutes, however, and so I am inclined to move forward on our agenda, which is future board agenda topics. I do have a list. Ooh, and an echo. So the next, we have some heavy items on our to cover list as a board. The next one, I want you to know that I'm targeting to get to discuss thoroughly, whether that's a single meeting or multiple. I do hope that we're able to narrow these agenda items to decisions, but will be related to Director Roscoe Beach's original request that was seconded by a number of folks to talk about our health education, sex education curriculum and overview, just a programmatic overview. So I'll be looking to get that onto initially a work session item, potentially later this month or at latest in December. That's our next item. I am also tracking that we have a number of other requests, disciplinary data, not ignoring that one. I'm working with the superintendent on when that will be most meaningful and most timely information for the board. And then we also have following sex education, health education. We also have, we're going to look for an update on the superintendent student advisory group and information about recruitment and retention of BIPOC and bilingual staff and processes. So just so the board's aware of what I am tracking on the request sheet. And with that, I will see everybody. Well, this meeting's adjourned, and I'll see everybody over in the
I have
regular board business meeting.
I have one comment about that. If we could just take maybe 20 minutes out of the next meeting to do like a work plan around that, so that we can track when we want to go and look at that and like the other agenda items that we have on. So we all have like a work plan that we're working from, so that we don't continuously try to add to maybe an overly burdened schedule already. And so if we could all have that, because I always have a list of things that I'm interested in bringing forward, and I like to see what's feasible, right? And so if we could just spend maybe 30 minutes in our next work session to do like an action plan on and timelines when we want to address things and how we can prioritize them, I would really appreciate that.
Okay. For now, yes, I hear that. We'll see what the agenda offers as far as time for the work session, if we can cover what we do have to. Also, just Sarah, would you mind sending out a link to the board request document, so that everybody can see what document I'm referring to? We'll just start to send that out cyclically as well. I understand that's short of a work plan that you're talking about, Robin, but yeah. And Dr. Pereira, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I want the board to know that because you want to know some information doesn't mean it has to be a board item. It can be a session or a scenario where you have a sit down with one of my team members or myself. It doesn't always have to be a board agenda item. I just want to share and open that opportunity up for the board.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, this meeting's adjourned. I will see everybody over in the regular board business meeting. Thanks, everybody.